And we're live. G'day. This is Xenium.Live, where we talk all things money, finance, and property. I'm your host, Scotty North. And today I have two very special guests. One who you most definitely recognise and who often gets a very long intro from me today. But because there's two guests, I've got to cut it down and I'm not going to do the intro. And besides, he didn't want to embarrass the next gentleman because I didn't have a long intro for. So the first guest we've got here today is Terry Ryder. And of course, we've got Adam Barclay who is the CEO of Gallery Group. Terry and Adam, welcome to Xenium.Live.
Hi, Scott. Lovely to be here, as always.
Hi, Scott. Coming to you from not so sunny Queensland, unfortunately.
Well, there you go. So, Terry, sorry about the quick rush intro. I know you normally expect a much larger one than that, but I thought, we just had to get straight into it today, mate. So next time, Terry, next time. Is that all right?
Sure, no worries.
All right, well, today's topic, we're talking about co-living and how I think it's a win-win-win. And we've put that out there and we've had a few questions around, what do you mean win-win-win? But we're going to get into that now. But before we go any further, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking to today, we've got Terry Ryder, is the founder of hotspotting.com.au. So Terry is very much into research and identifying those future growth areas. That's what he lives and breathes, and it's very good work that he puts out. You should check out his website at hotspotting.com.au. And we've had Terry on the show numerous times before. Today's new guest, Adam, is, as I said, CEO of Gallery Group. Now, Adam, I interact with you guys as, Gallery the Builder, but Gallery Group obviously sounds a lot bigger than that. Is that just a name, or is there a lot more to it, the fact that you've got quite a lot of staff and other bits and pieces?
No, look, Scott, it's a business that's evolved over a period of time. So we started out purely in the residential construction space, and as a consequence, our business has evolved over a period of time. Now we're an end-to-end business where we have offices in Queensland, office in Brisbane, Gold Coast, office in Sydney and in Melbourne, so licensed to build in each of the states. And we have a development business with a financial services license, and we have a real estate / asset management business as well. So it really is an integrated residential construction company.
That's excellent. Well, I can see how you got the name Gallery Group then, not Gallery Builder, because it's a little bit more than that. Now, I read on your website you had 500 staff, or over 500 staff. Does that mean you don't actually have to do anything?
That means I've got 500 people that I'm responsible for servicing and making sure that they get everything that they need to keep their days successful. So we look at an organisational chart in an inverse form at Gallery Group. So I sit at the bottom of the org chart, and my role is to support every single person in the place.
Well, it's definitely a downhill trip on the organisational chart from you, because we got Terry, he's got 5 or 6 staff, and there's me, he's like got none. So I'm definitely at the bottom of the pile here on today's conversation. So we're going to move on from the HR department, and let's talk about what we're here to talk about. So Terry, can you give us a quick overview of what's happened in the past, so what you've seen in the markets the past month and what have you, especially in the Queensland, Brisbane area, because it's running hot. It seems like every time I see a news article, it's talking about, people moving to Brisbane, what's happening in Brisbane, everything about southeast Queensland. And I know that it's a pretty hot topic at the moment. So what are you seeing up here in the lovely Queensland, apart from the fact that they're locked down at the moment? Is what the media is saying, is it too late, too little? Is it accurate? What's your take on it?
Look, I think if media is saying that Brisbane's heading into a real estate boom, I think they're being broadly accurate. It's been building for a while. Brisbane's been threatening to boom for perhaps the last 3 years or more. In fact, many of the pundits, at the start of each year, we always have the forecast for the year to come. And for the past 2 or 3 years, many pundits have suggested that Brisbane's going to lead. For various reasons, it hasn't done that until now. But I think this is the year when Brisbane actually starts to realise its potential and really does start to lead nationally. It's starting to show up in our research data already. It was building through the second half of last year and into the beginning of 2021. The sales volume figures have just increased exponentially in the last 6 or 9 months, right across the Brisbane metropolitan area. And we're starting to see that naturally translate into uplifting price growth. And anecdotally, we're getting reports every day from people at the coalface of the industry that there's very heavy demand coming into the Brisbane market, both locally and from interstate, and properties are selling very quickly. So the natural consequence of that is strongly rising prices throughout this year, and it's also predicted that it will continue into next year by respected forecasters.
So, Adam, as a builder, amongst other things, I mean, you guys must be flat out like every other builder I talk to at the moment. I mean, that's you're talking about. Terry's talking about the coalface. You must be seeing firsthand what's actually going on around, well, in lots of places, but especially southeast corner, right?
Absolutely. Look, I think I've been in this marketplace for about 20 years in terms of development and construction, and it's certainly in my 20 years in southeast Queensland, we are going through the biggest change that I've experienced. So both in terms of looking at both supply and demand, I think we're at an all-time low in terms of land supply, and I personally don't see that getting a whole lot better with the advent of the SEQ Koala plan, which means there's less supply coming through the system, and certainly with increased demand added to that. So I think we've got a real point in time where you add affordability to that mix, and I think you're going to see some substantial changes in pricing in southeast Queensland. And in fact, you're actually seeing it now. If I look at the last 6 months, price movements as a function of home builders, there's been some substantial price growth in the likes of Gold Coast, Moreton Bay, and the Sunshine Coast in particular.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's definitely echoing everything that Terry says whenever he gets on here. Hey Terry, I got a good one for you. I saw an email or a news article yesterday from one of your mates. I think he's on your Christmas card list, Harry Dent, and he's talking about how it's a real estate crash and it's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. And I read it and I thought, hang on, tick. Which year am I in right now? Because I'm pretty sure I've read this every year previously for about the past 15 years, but it seems to be the same drum that man is always beating. But that's the sort of stuff that goes round there and is always ripe for discussion at this time in the markets. What do you think?
Look, I don't think there's a great deal of discussion about what Harry Dent is saying anymore. I know that he recently popped up again, but they've got very little media because his credibility is at an all-time low. It was maybe the 5th or 6th time in the last 10 or 12 years that he's popped up in Australia predicting a collapse in property prices in the next 12 months. He's being spectacularly wrong every other time, and he will be again this time. He does it to drum up free publicity, for a book launch or a seminar tour. And let's not waste a lot of time talking about him, Scott.
No, mate, I know. I know how much you enjoy talking about him. I just always have to throw it in there. So, look,
we should perhaps focus on just something that Adam referred to there, and I think it was about land supply and some of the overlays that impinge on the ability to turn, given supply of land into a reasonable supply of dwellings. And that was something that, Scott, you and I attended a business breakfast on the Sunshine Coast very recently. And one of the presenters there made the point that with a number of case studies, here's a piece of land which the council says we can create 200 home sites with. But by the time you apply the bushfire overlay, the koala overlay, the drainage overlay, and various other overlays, that 200 dwellings is reduced to something like 70 or 80 dwellings. And that's part of the problem in terms of southeast Queensland, Brisbane, the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, creating the number of dwellings that we're going to need to service the demand that's coming in, particularly from people moving from interstate, which the numbers show is happening in growing numbers.
Yeah, look, I agree, and I found that was the most interesting part about that meeting we went to, Terry, was exactly that, how that the council and the planners, the government planners, think along one line, and then they can take an overall snapshot and say we can fit X number, 1,000 dwellings in there or 10,000, whatever. But in reality, with all the other rules already in place, it's between 40 and 45% of what they actually think, which isn't doing anything to help, of course, bringing new properties on or keeping the price of existing properties down, or the land supply, which is what Adam was talking about. So I think that's very much important, which is then of course, thrusting us into the co-living discussion. So the co-living comes about because it's a cheaper way to rent, right? Instead of one person having to rent one whole house themselves, they can share, shared living, shared arrangement, shared accommodation, whatever it might be, and so it's a way to mitigate those costs of living, I suppose, by sharing with others. Now, this is not a new concept, right? I mean, I'm sure people were sharing caves back in the day. We probably all shared houses at uni, for those of us who went to uni, which is probably, 2/3 of this discussion. I'm just going to sit at the bottom of the pile again there, boys, and don't worry about that. And so it's not a new thing, and it's always comes about in some form, right? Whether it's duplex sharing or dual occupancy or boarding house or whatever it might be, there's always something there. But Adam, I'm going to throw this over to you. Obviously, you're kind of busy, taking tea and coffee to your 500 staff and that bits and pieces. But how do you go about making the decision to move into a brand new product line like co-living? Like, you've got your houses there right now, and they're not cookie cutter. There's the good plans, there's the on-demand plans, there's all that sort of stuff. You've got your amazing portal at the back end. Why did you wake up one morning or the group around you and say, oh, let's do something completely, new, and let's spend a bunch of cash on developing a new product line? How did that come about?
Scott, it was really about looking at household demographics and understanding sort of the shifting marketplace, as it were. So looking at census data, we very quickly realised that the fastest growing market segment in Australia is what they phrase as lone person households. So we said, okay, if that market is growing so quickly, what accommodation does that market look for? So there was some fantastic macro data. We then went out and engaged in some social media groups that are specific to shared accommodation or co-living, and conducted some really detailed surveys around what that marketplace is looking for, and got some invaluable feedback from people living in that accommodation to tell us what they want from that accommodation type. And just a couple of the things that we learned when I started down this path. I had this preconceived idea that it was, quite frankly, student accommodation. We very quickly learned from in excess of 1,300 respondents that the average age is 33 years old for people in shared accommodation, and the average tenure in shared accommodation is 4 to 5 years. So this is a decision that people are making as a life decision, largely driven around affordability, but also around loneliness and helping to cure social isolation. So it's a huge issue for Australia, made more prevalent through COVID. So it's a timely product for us.
That's really interesting. I mean, the stats there, what do you say, 33 years old and 4+ years was for the tenure.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I don't know what the average general rental market looks like. Perhaps that's a similar age, but I don't know. How does that tenure compare to the normal rental market? Did you do any stats on that? Because my gut's probably telling me it seems longer than a normal tenure in a normal rental.
Well, I think that in a traditional rental context, oftentimes you've got a couple that are moving into a property together. So they're what I'll call upwardly mobile, and quite frankly, it's the decisions that most of these people that have made in terms of their employment choices, that it just so happens that they sit in what is, I'll call the lower 50% bracket in terms of income earning, which is just under $90,000 per year for an individual. But that $89,000 per year translates to about $66,000 a year in net income. And if you then bolt onto that the definition of rental distress, which is anything over 30% of your net income being paid in rental payments, any individual paying over about $400 per week in rent is by definition in rental distress. So that as a consequence means that co-living, if you get the product right, is a huge opportunity and provides
so I'm doing the figures here as you're talking. So that's exactly right. So if we're talking about 66 net, that's 22,000 is 30%, which is $423 a week. I mean, it's pretty hard to get a house for that like, I'm not going to say impossible, but it's pretty dang hard.
And then particularly if you're connecting all of the services and paying for them yourself, you've then got obviously individual bond to pay, and then you've got to furnish the property. It becomes a real challenge for someone to find a property, particularly that's new, well maintained, and then furnishing it. So it's those upfront costs that come in moving into your own property that make it really, really difficult for people.
All right, so you guys have done the research and that, and I know that you put a lot of that on your website here. So let's take a look at that right now, which is rewardbygallery.com.au. And so take us through, because I know Terry is a data dude, and he's going to love seeing some of this stuff here.
Sure.
I'll go around the wagon wheel here, Adam,
Yep.
and you tell me. So we've got dwelling supply. So you can talk through whatever you want to talk through.
Very broadly speaking, the biggest information source publicly available is flatmates.com.au. It captures about half of the rooms that are available and about 30% of the tenants that are out there looking for properties. So we know that there's about 30,000 rooms nationally for shared accommodation. Flatmates.com.au has about 15,000 of them. So straight away, irrespective of the quality of the property, we know that there's a 1 to 2 deficiency, if I like to call it that, between supply of rooms. Then if you talk about tenant demand, we know that right now that there's about 55,000 tenants out there in the marketplace. Flatmates has about 20,000 of them looking today. So anyone can jump onto flatmates.com.au, have a look at the number of tenants that are looking for somewhere to live, and it's a P2P or peer-to-peer website. So it's individuals putting their name, face, and details on there saying, I am looking for this property type in X location. So if you then add to that, if you jump around the wagon wheel a bit further, Scott, we've got some research. We went out to about 1,300 individuals and got some invaluable feedback. As I said, the 33 years of age being the average age, 45 years being the tenure. And then we asked the question of the people that are living in shared accommodation today, what's most important to you about that accommodation? And private bathroom was number 1 on the list. A lockable pantry so that people's food was secure was number 2. The fact that the property is dedicated co-living was number 3. So people don't want to be moving into a home where the owner is living in the property at the same time.
Yep.
There was an absolute requirement for the property to be fully furnished and for each bedroom to be air conditioned and lockable. So if you look at that product type and then say, okay, how does that translate over to flatmates.com.au? If you simply on flatmates.com.au then enter in private bathroom and fully furnished, you end up with less than 4% of properties available on flatmates.com.au offering that type of accommodation.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so much product out there that is not servicing what this fastest growing market in Australia is looking for.
Yeah. That was the observation that I was coming to listening to you speaking, Adam, that, most people out there, young people and people of other age groups as well, as you point out, are kind of sharing accommodation, but they're not getting any of those dot points in what they would normally get by renting a house with a bunch of mates in the traditional fashion. They're not getting the private bathroom or the lockable pantry, etc., and probably not furnished. So there's a whole huge need revealed by your research that's just not being fulfilled by the private rental market or the traditional.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Terry. And knowing that you're such a proponent of data, this is where we started with this. So let's understand the marketplace, understand what the problem is, and provide a solution for it. So everything that we've designed is simply to meet the needs of what the marketplace really wants.
Okay, so now this is touched on my next question, Adam, is that about 18 months ago I did an interview with a bloke who was doing rooming accommodation, and it was good. It was actually really quite a nice design, but it still looked like a bit of rooming accommodation. Kind of looked kind of housey, but still had that feel. It was very much inner city, infill sort of blocks. This is nothing like what you're doing, which is leading on to the next thing, building regulations, I'm assuming. There we go, Rooming Accommodation Act. So tell me how this differs from rooming accommodation in terms of your co-living plans.
Yeah, there's a really clear dividing line between general tenancy arrangements and rooming accommodation, and it comes down to the number of tenants within a property. And this is both in Queensland and Victoria. So if you have any more than 3 tenants living in a property, you then shift from being what we would call 1A accommodation, which is a standard home, or 1B, which is rooming accommodation type product. The minute you shift to 1B, you move into a totally different part of legislation. So the construction methodology changes. You've got Residential Services Act in Queensland that has significant penalties for people that aren't living in accommodation that meet the specific needs of rooming accommodation, and you limit significantly where you can actually produce this product. So major changes, disability services, fire safety, etc., that have a significant impact, and I see people advertising what I would define as rooming accommodation, 1B accommodation, but not providing those services and infrastructure that are required with it, and that I can say is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and if it's not approved for it, right? If it's not even built to the code, then as you're saying, that's a big deal. All right, so that's the big difference there. So I can keep going around, or we can go on to the next thing, Adam. Whatever you want. Do you want me to keep going around the circle here?
Keep going around, yeah. So research-based design really comes down to our designs, and we quite simply picked up the information that we got from the marketplace. They told us what they wanted to have included into the houses, so we built it. So thinking about both what the market wants and bringing that together with building regulations. So all of our designs have 4 bedrooms with 3 bathrooms, so that each tenant, each resident has their own bathroom. Lockable pantries, they are dedicated co-living. They're fully furnished. They have individual air conditioning and solar panels to compress costs, and along with data points and TV points to each of the bedrooms. So it's really quite simple. Ask the marketplace what it wants and give the marketplace what it wants.
So, Adam, just on that building regulations, we've got a question here from Kevin who says, does this apply to New South Wales as well? So I think you mentioned if Queensland and Victoria was the 1A, 1B, 3-tenant thing. Does it apply to New South Wales as well? Do you know that answer?
No, there are some changes coming. There's some changes currently happening in New South Wales. But we're not actively involved in building these in New South Wales because of the nuances, quite frankly. So our focus is on the 2 markets of Queensland and Victoria as a consequence.
Yep. All right. Good. Okay. Financing construction. So, it's standard residential, it seems.
Yeah, so it's a standard residential property. So if you said for anyone out there in the marketplace looking to buy an investment property right now, where are the hurdles or the roadblocks that people perhaps aren't aware of initially? And the greatest challenge that everyone looking at investment property has is finance. And that's not to suggest that buying a co-living property is without its challenges. Valuations are an issue irrespective of where you are, but because this is a standard property, not a specific co-living or boarding accommodation, it's a standard residential lend. The reality is that it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom homes with extra high ceilings, with solar panels, air conditioning to each of the bedrooms. Its ultimate product type could be used as a co-living product or an upmarket family home. So it sits in that space where it has this dual usage. So lower construction costs than commercial property, again, which helped to support that valuation process.
And that was the issue that we had in my discussion with the rooming accommodation bloke, was the financing, and he sort of had to get through it to make it happen, and then after 18 months or 2 years refinance under a commercial lens. So it was a completely different beast. All right, so property management. So this is obviously something that's pretty important if you've got more than 1 tenant, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about one person living different. They're effectively 3 tenants in the house. So you guys have a pretty good structure set up to handle that.
Yeah, this is all, and this is absolute key in terms of having a successful outcome with a property type. So we as a business manage just over 500 homes now that are all homes that we have built, and then we have a specialist division within our asset management business that is called Click Concierge, and that is a team whose sole focus is on curating the tenants that move into each of these homes to ensure that we have longevity with the tenants. Obviously, they're fully furnished. We've got a strategic relationship with flatmates.com.au where, unlike a typical property that you're advertising for rent where you put it on realestate.com and wait for someone to contact you, we can, through flatmates.com.au, reach out to a tenant when we're at enclosed stage. We can, if let's just say it was in Logan Reserve, we can go onto flatmates.com.au, do a search of tenants within a 10-kilometre radius. Flatmates.com.au lets you do that. We can then make direct contact with those tenants and say, hey, we've got a property coming up in Logan Reserve, it'll be ready in 10 weeks' time. Are you interested in it? So it's a real proactive approach to getting tenants in the minute the homes are finished. We also provide a service of furniture procurement, installation, delivery, etc. So that all comes as part of it. So it comes with a standard furniture package that the client orders through us, and we manage that entire process. So there's the general tenancy agreements, there's house rules, tenancy matching, 3 bonds. We do inspections every second month, and that's inspections to the common areas and also each bedroom to make sure that the tenants are treating the house with the respect and care that it deserves, and making sure also that the relationship between the tenants is a positive one, quite frankly.
Yeah, well, that'd be interesting, isn't it? You're not just tenant managers, you're relationship managers there on that. So we might move on from that one because that's a big job. I'm glad I'm not doing it. And so, of course, the one that we always talk about with our clients when we talk about strategy, I know Terry does the same, is the exit strategy. That's a pretty big one, right? I mean, you can't just have something that's completely designed for one particular purpose and you can never have anyone else sell it because it sort of limits the market. This is not that.
No, look, I think we've been we were very early adopters, if I like to use that phrase, for dual dwellings in southeast Queensland. So we started building the dual dwelling product back in 2011 and have continued to do so. But I think, and I can say this because we've built over 1,000 of them. If there's been a limitation, either perceived or real, around the dual dwellings, the question mark has always been around that resale, whether there's a ceiling, if you like to call it that, as a consequence of it really being a specialist investment property. I can say with the co-living property that, as I said, in essence, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home with 25-50 ceilings. It's got AC to all bedrooms. It's got solar. It can be absolutely used for either for rental purposes for that yield, co-living, but on exit, if someone makes the decision that they want to sell it, they could choose to sell it on a yield basis out to the marketplace. But if there's been in an area really strong capital growth, exit the tenants and sell it out to an owner occupier. So that's where I think this is the real the real jewel of this product. I think it's what creates such an opportunity where we know that when you ask the question of the marketplace, what's more important, capital growth or yield, it is irrespective of the audience that I ask that question, it sort of lands on 50-50. They want both. And I think this is the first time we've had a product that lets someone get that really strong income and then get the uplift.
They always want both, Adam. Everyone wants both. Terry, what does someone say to you when they have a discussion? It's like, what do you want? Oh, I want capital growth and high cash flow. That's okay. That's fine. We've now got the magic pill.
But it's interesting how many people think you've got to make a choice between one or the other. And in webinars and live seminars and other discussions with real estate consumers, there's this assumption that you've got to make a choice between one or the other. And I always say if they make good locational choices and good product choices, they have a very nice blend of both. You don't have to make a choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. So Terry, on this, I'm going to pick up some comments that Adam made, and he talked about the lower half of income earners, which was, it doesn't. Maybe I'm getting too old, right? But the under $90,000 a year earning still seems pretty high to me. But is it fair to say in the data that you look at and compiling all those reports, I'm thinking of the cheapies with prospects and those other areas that you do, are the people that are earning, the lower half of income, are they gravitating towards these cheaper areas that are now the ones that are in demand? Do you have any correlation with that data that you see?
Not quite in those terms, but I think what has stood out in the last 6 to 9 months, when we've seen this incredible uplift in sales activity in Brisbane, Southeast Queensland, but across Australia as well. There's certainly a focus on affordability. So what our numbers for Brisbane have shown in the last, say, 6 months in terms of sales activity is that there's particularly strong demand coming into those markets where prices are more affordable. Moreton Bay region in the northern outer ring of Brisbane, and then their southern equivalent, Logan City, which forms the urban bridge between Brisbane City and the Gold Coast, and so beautifully located, offers affordability, has great infrastructure, and those markets are just getting really, really strong demand from people, buyers of all types that have a budget, limited by their incomes perhaps, but they might be investors, they might be first home buyers, they might be other types of home buyers. But affordability is, a really key factor that's driving the market at the moment. And it's interesting that APRA, which has been asked a lot of questions lately about the uplift in prices and lending, making the comment to a parliamentary committee in the past week that the market's been driven by first home buyers and others at that lower end of the market.
Yeah, that is super interesting. So, those areas that are more affordable are in demand, and it still doesn't mean it's any more easy to get cycles out of the ground there, which cycles right back to our original comments at the start of this 30 minutes, which was about the land supply and the event that Terry and I went to, and Adam's comments on you don't see it becoming any easier. So what my point is, the sole solution to this is going to be this type of product, because if those people are looking for affordable places in those areas and they're now becoming technically unaffordable for them, well, this is what we're going to be looking at needing to provide in those areas. Am I wrong?
No, I think that I'm really. We have our own developments in Logan Corridor. So we're just finishing off a 44-lot subdivision in Homeview, and we've just launched another 77-lot subdivision in Logan Reserve, and I'm actually staggered at the affordability disparity between Logan, for instance, and many of the corridors in Melbourne. You can still buy a 400 square metre block of land in Logan for $240,000. That is, by comparison, even compared to the Sunshine Coast or Gold Coast. The Gold Coast now is almost for a 375 square metre block of land, you're really talking $1,000 a metre for land in the Gold Coast now. Moreton Bay, you're talking more probably $800 a metre, but you're still at $600 a metre for Logan, and I just can't see how that's going to remain. I'll be staggered if by October, November this year, that hasn't moved much closer to 300 than the 240. Irrespective of the supply, I just think that western corridor of Brisbane, that as Terry so well pointed out, it's almost this golden economic triangle using Brisbane, Gold Coast and out to Ipswich, Logan, where there is so much infrastructure money being spent that it can't do anything but grow rapidly in terms of price point.
Yeah, and I think the key word is infrastructure. I think that's the factor that's been missing from Brisbane. The comment I made at the beginning was Brisbane has been predicted to lead for perhaps the past 2 to 3 years, but really hasn't. Now it's coming into its time to shine, and I think the infrastructure spend is a huge part of the reason why that's now starting to happen, because it generates so much economic activity, so many jobs. It also improves the amenity of locations if the infrastructure is a new rail link or a new or upgraded motorway, university campus, hospital. All those things add to the appeal of location, as well as generating so much in terms of economic activity and jobs, both in the creation of them and in the operation of them after they're finished. So very, very important factor for Brisbane in its rise. I think the game changer, or the extra element on top of all that, is the 2032 Olympics. Not so much. I know we're going to get a lot of hype about the post-Olympics boom. I think it's going to be a pre-Olympics boom, and it's going to be generated by the infrastructure spend that will be preceding that event. It sounds a long way away, but in terms of what needs to be created between now and then, and it needs to start now, and that's going to be a huge generator for Brisbane property markets over the next, say, 5 or 6 years.
I think
That's
adding that, Terry, you and I are old enough to remember the 6 or 7 years prior to Sydney 2000, and I was involved in Olympic movement at the time, and I can vividly recall how Sydney actually changed in the lead up to the 2000 Olympics and the spending that was going on there, and it really put Sydney on the international map. And I think that when you look at the expansion of the Brisbane airport that hasn't really yet opened up, I look at Queen's Wharf and compare it to Crown Casino in Melbourne and what it did to put Melbourne on the international map. I think Queen's Wharf's going to do that. And I also look at the Olympic movement now and how it operates today with, I'll say, significantly more oversight than perhaps it had 5 or 10 years ago. I don't believe the IOC comes out and makes statements that we are the probable winner for 2032 without there being some really serious commitments to the city of Brisbane, because there's a huge amount of infrastructure spending. And I believe as a result of that, the next 10 years in Brisbane, you'll see more change than the prior 20 years.
Yeah, and we've seen we saw what Expo 88 did for Brisbane. We've seen what the Commonwealth Games way back when also did for Brisbane. And so this is just another step in the evolution of Brisbane as a city and a serious player in the national life of Australia. I'd just like to go back to the co-living concept. What I like about it as an observer of real estate is that it represents a win-win. It's a win for the occupants, the tenants, because they can achieve their needs at a lower price than if they were forced to rent an entire dwelling themselves. But it's also a win for the investor owner, because they at the same time get a higher return. So, but I think the aspect that I like about it from an investment viewpoint, that it's great for the occupants, but it's also great for the investor owner.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. And then I've got a third win, which I think is great for the community too, Terry, because a lot of times that unaffordable housing, or the affordable housing has looked a certain way, let's put it that sort of way, or it's been housing commission, or it's been boarding houses, and that's not at all what this is looking like now. In fact, I've got a package here that I want to run through quickly. It's the final thing on our show today, up on the Property Hotspot website. So it's www.propertyhotspot.com.au, and you can select property and look through the listings there. And this is actually a gallery listing we've got up there. It's in Logan, and we're talking about there. So we're looking up to about an 8% return. And I'll quickly go through. This is what a floor plan looks like. Now, it's probably a bit hard to see if you're on notebooks there, but it's about as big as I can make it, I think. So we've got the bedrooms each with their own ensuite there, and then we've got not a spare room, a media room, etc. All the common areas with the lounge, dining, and kitchen, and then the garage and a study and what have you. So it for all intents and purposes, it looks like a normal house, right? I mean, this is just what it looks like.
Just to add to that, Scott, very quickly, with that floor plan, important to understand that we asked the question of the marketplace, tenants I should call it, what's most important in the garage or living area, and there was divided views. So 2 of the bedrooms have an ensuite and get dedicated use of the garage. The third bedroom, if I call it that, also gets the private media room to support it. So what that means is there's less pressure on the living area. So you've got two people using the main living area, and one of the tenants that is bedroom 3 with the two-way bathroom that they close off effectively, getting exclusive use of the media room, and that suits more and more of the marketplace where that's someone that's working from home. That can become a home office. So they've got a bedroom and they've got a home office. So there's some really innovative thinking around the design that doesn't put pressure on any one of the living spaces.
Yeah, and I think that the advantage of this is that it looks like a house. I mean, it just looks like a house. It doesn't look like a boarding house, doesn't look like any sort of preconceived housing commission, because when government build housing, it never ends well. It just looks like a house, and that's part of the thing that works in the community. It means that people have a home over there. They have a roof over their head. They have a home. We can see by the stats that they're not people that move around. They're people that like to stay where they are. So that's good for consistency of neighbours. You get to know people. And the places they're living in look like normal houses. It's completely integrated into our fabric of society, and I think that is a massive win. It's much better than just having, groups of people spread around in certain spots together. It's much better having them like this, integrated. And I think that is probably one of the biggest wins that we get out of this co-living product. All right, well, I don't think there's anything else to show on this one. What else we got here? So that's it. So if you want to know more about that, you can hit us up on the Property Hotspot website. Just go to propertyhotspot.com.au and hit on the Contact Us page, or of course, you can go straight through on listing and check that out first, then hit us up on the Contact Us page. And I think that's going to be about it for today, because we've gone over time, which I know I'm going to get off this, and Terry's going to call me back on the phone and say, Scott, you told me it's going to be 30 minutes. It's not. It's been 42. What's going on? And it's just, I'm never going to hear the end of it, Adam. So, mate, if you never see me again, you know what's happened, right?
Signing off.
Well, look, thank you very much, Adam, for joining us today. Adam Barclay is the CEO of Gallery Group, and of course, the wonderful, the only Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au. Terry, your insights are magical and worthy of some sort of gold payment every time you open your mouth. I appreciate you joining us today.
I'll send you my invoice later.
That's good. Look, I've got a special address you can send that to, and I'll tell you offline. All right. Thank you, fellas, for joining us. And look, if you have missed this episode, you're catching the tail end, feel free to jump on our podcast, which is in all the podcast stores, which is Xenium.Live. Go and search it up. Or, of course, you can look at our Xenium Facebook page, our YouTube channel, all that sort of stuff. Or you can email us at hello@Xenium.Live. No .coms, no .aus, just hello@Xenium.Live. And that is the same for the website, www.Xenium.Live. And that is it. You can call us on 1300 667789, and of course that info has been scrolling at the bottom of the screen the whole time. All right, well, that's it for all things money, finance and property today on Xenium Live. I'm your host, and I've enjoyed talking to Terry and Adam, and this has been Xenium Live.